ASHER.
Hey, Asher, it's Debbie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so happy that we get to chat this morning.
Well, that's beautiful, and I agree. This is super fun.
One of the greatest things about Dig is your casting of Thomas Jane and Harlow.
Yeah.
The whole film is built around that dynamic. That is the core of the film. And you really feel it. And what you have done working in tandem with your DP, with Stephen St. Peter, you give us this intimacy that starts with the father and daughter. And the chemistry between Harlow and Thomas is just off the charts. And
Agreed.
And as you well know, there are so many father and daughter combos that we may not have had such a dynamic had they been cast together.
I think that they're first of all, Harlow is a preternaturally talented young actress. So I'm going to start there. And the work she did, I just am so excited to work with her again and to see her career blossom, because she's really just special. And Thomas is the greatest gift I've ever had as a director. I mean, I've worked with him now 2 times as a filmmaker, once as a producer, and we're currently working on another project together. And I think he's one of the more sort of underappreciated actors of the last 30 years.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the thing is, Thomas has only gotten better with age. And he has gotten more astute, not only in terms...
I will say that my wife is a massive fan of The Sweetest Thing. Mm-hmm. And when I first started working with Thomas, that's all she doesn't see a bunch of action movies, but it's all she kept thinking about was, oh my God, you're working with the guy who's like the lead guy in The Sweetest Thing. Like, I don't think most people really know him for that, but I told Thomas, and he goes, I haven't seen that movie in 25 years.
Oh my gosh. But no, in his role selections and in his approach to a character, he has become more astute over the years. And
I totally agree.
With that astuteness, especially in performance, comes greater depth, emotional depth.
Agreed.
And
100%.
You really see that here, and we needed to see that here as this film moves along and we get to that third act. I mean, the trailer, the teaser line, how far would you go to save your daughter? And we always see this from a mother's perspective. We've seen it through Liam Neeson's eyes in the Taken franchise, but it's very rare to see a story like this from the father's perspective.
I agree. I'm a father. I'm a father of 2. I actually have a little baby girl, and I have a 6-year-old son.
Aww.
And I, I got this project in the middle of the pandemic. I had a couple of some health issues. My wife had some health issues that were not pandemic related, and I had just sort of, as almost cathartically gone and made the first film I worked on with Thomas Slayer's vampire film. And as I was editing it, I was handed the script, and I really didn't know how to interpret and deal with my trauma that I had gone through. And so reading the script, I really connected with the idea of trying to, sort of have a rebirth through tragedy. And then, but, at the same time, I'm a really big fan of elevated, genre, elevated exploitation,
Mm-hmm.
and specific. They call it genre now. In the '70s, these movies were classified as exploitation. Even films like Mean Streets. I think that there's a misnomer about prestige films today that is almost misremembering that there are films by Walter Hill and Martin Scorsese and William Friedkin in the '70s and De Palma that were specifically labeled as exploitation films,
Right.
but really we're working with themes that we work with today. And obviously European, reviewers and Pauline Kael were able to really, explain to them a larger audience that these were as much art films as they were genre pictures. And I do believe that this script, and when I read it, I kind of looked at it and said, well, this is kind of in that zone, and those are my favorite movies.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then obviously I'm 42, I grew up in the 90s, and that was the greatest sort of explosion of elevated genre exploitation films, with regards to Tarantino and some of the, other sort of rebels of the backlot of the 90s. So, to me that this film, although it has this sort of tragic Shakespearean sort of thrust of the plot, there's a lot of fun to be had around it as well.
So much of that fun, while you've got Thomas and Harlow as Brennan and Jane, while they are grounding the film in this core dynamic, the emotionality of a dad and his daughter, and there's nothing like a daddy and his little girl, no matter how old they get, you counter that with the insanity of Leanna Liberato's character and Emile Hirsch. Those two,
Right.
and for Leanna to see her do this is so far from Leanna. What, talk about a stretch for an actor.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
This really gives us a side of her, and this is what acting is all about.
I have always loved Liana. I'm a huge Sons of Anarchy fan. I loved her in Light as a Feather, and I remember I saw Banana Split because I was a film that I had circled as something I was going to purchase when it was a script when I was running a digital media company in the mid-2010s. And I was really just sort of taken by the fact that she was starting to put things together and showing a little bit of a darker side.
Mm-hmm.
That movie is obviously not dark, but I think that her character wrestles with stuff. And when we were looking for our final piece, I really wanted her, but it was hard for me to just sort of go and get her direct because we were pretty strapped with budget. So what I did was I did an open call, but then I kind of told, because I wanted everyone on tape. Also, Liana was not, as you said, is not typecast for this movie.
That's right.
So I needed to get her on tape, and it's pretty hard when you're dealing with an actress who's done work to get them to just put themselves on tape for a small picture like this. So what I did was I did an open call, made it sound sexy, and then I went to the agent and I said, look, I really just want Liana for the role. So can you just get her on tape? And it was definitely a gamble, but then she did the scene in the trailer with she did the two scenes she did on screen were the scene in the trailer that ultimately results in a sort of I would say a sort of sordid scene, and then the scene in the bathroom with her and Harlem. So those were the two scenes that I had her put on tape. And I think from the second that I saw them, I was like, I just called everyone else and said, I'm not really looking for anybody anymore. So it was kind of a big swing. I don't know. I mean, it could have, I could have been wrong, but then I saw it and I remember Thomas didn't know who she was, and then we did our first day of filming and we're driving back, and Tom, oh man, how did you know? I can't believe that you were able to find this girl. So yeah, I mean, and obviously Emile is just, just a great actor and a titan. You know what I mean? So
Emile is so he is so chameleonic. There is nothing he can't do. And as he has matured as an actor, it's another case of, boy, he is using all the tools in the toolbox that he's acquired over the decades. Watching he and Leanna is spellbinding. Spellbinding, because they are both nut jobs, and you don't know what's going to happen, what's going to set them off. And that really fuels the tension and has you on the edge of your seat. And you counter that with what Harlow is giving us. And it is just an incredible, incredible watch from a performance standpoint. Really well done, ASHER.
But I really do. I appreciate that.
But then you go, you take the next leap. And working with Stephen, you develop a visual tonal bandwidth that is essentially very minimalist. And with your color palette, it is very nondescript. It is the dusty dirt, and it fits the dirtiness of this story. And you leave using color. The one character that really stands out is Harlow, with her jumpsuit, the white with the neon paint, and her blonde hair. And she really is a catalyst for 90% of this film.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that, and it is intentional. I think that one of the things you'll notice is at the beginning of the film is tonally a little much more evocative in terms of the colors, saturation, and obviously tonally is it feels like a very, very, very intense and brutal first 5 minutes of the film.
Yes.
Once we get to the next part of the film, because I do feel like this film plays, in three sections. The next part of the film is sort of subjectively looking almost through Brennan's eyes of, I like to say he's like a sort of beaten down lion in the film, right? And the world is pretty dreary. The landscapes are washed out, like you had mentioned, and I really wanted it to set the world so that once we get to the ranch and once Emil and Rihanna arrive, it's sort of like you don't really know what time of day it is anymore, because we wanted it to be disorienting, so we shot a lot of stuff. I block shot stuff in magic hour a lot when we were outside. We really stayed away, aside from maybe one or two scenes from sun. We wanted to make sure it was either overcast or we were doing magic hour. And then, of course, at the end, the very end of the film, colors start, trickling back. With Harlow's, with the outfits, obviously we wanted to make sure that Thomas's character also almost kind of looked like an aging animal, like an aging predator. So it's all muted and dirty and everything. When we get to Harlow, I really wanted to keep a modern aesthetic and kind of give her a little bit like a Billie Eilish look. And I did love the idea that she popped when no one else did. And then there's little inflections of color throughout that kind of allow for it to not feel so muted. Obviously, Rihanna's character has a ghost gun, which is like a real thing where people, want fetishize their guns and want them to be like, jewelry. And I thought that was a really fun way to kind of, be contemporary, but also bring some color in. And so the palette to me, and I always sort of, go with, a muted or sort of juxtaposed with primaries. So I think it's great because when the blood comes, it really pops.
Yeah.
And I'm a disciple of the of blood as art.
There's no such thing as too much blood.
100%. There's no such thing as too much blood, absolutely. And especially if you're doing it correctly.
That's right. And also what I love about Harlow's costuming, not just the jumpsuit and with the white and the neon pops, but also the jewelry that she's wearing, because it reminds us that she does have hearing difficulties. And as anybody who is familiar with individuals with a sensory impairment of some sort, the other senses become heightened. So obviously, if she's not hearing things clearly, she may be compensating to make herself more visible with the jewelry.
Yeah, I mean, I want to credit that to, my sister was the wardrobe on this film, Alex, and, she did a really great job. We did all this stuff out here. And so, we really had a lot of conversations about each character being unique to themselves.
I really appreciated that. But a big element of this film is Jane's hearing issues, traumatic hearing loss. And the fact that your sound design is so important here. I love what you have done with the sound design in terms of presenting a partial muffled sound as she's straining to hear something.
Well, at the time I was trying to find really solid references, and Sound of Metal had just come out, and which is such a great movie,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, like tragically underappreciated at the Academy Awards. And their sound work, I guess, well, they won for sound design. But the sound design in that movie is really incredible because it's not like everything, the volume goes completely mute, which is sort of the way that you've seen it in the past. It's this sort of underwater sound design that's really special. And so we kind of played with that. And obviously, the sound mixing, is an important element because you want it to be disorienting and you want to, especially with the movie having a lot of sequences, of the trauma trials in the film, making sure that the soundtrack also is a different character as well, and bringing in some sort of throwback needle drops and kind of giving it its own feel. I think that there was a lot of focus on how we can elevate the material quite a bit, through unique sound design, as you mentioned before, wardrobe, and then also, coming up with a really cool soundtrack for the film that spoke to the characters in different ways. Thomas's character is basically an old cowboy, and we had some good honky tonk, and then Rihanna and Emil's characters are sort of wannabe gangsters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love the idea of trying to bring in some rare groove stuff that would be sampled in hip hop and stuff like that. And so we kind of mixed them both together so that they almost became scenes in the film.
Yeah, your needle drops. It's such an eclectic blend, but it fits. It fits moments and it fits individuals. And I found in some cases it's almost like a juxtaposition, but then as you're watching, you realize it's not, and it really is an extension of either the person or the setting.
There's nothing worse than, I don't like ironic cues. I like cues that feel like they should be there, but are telling another element of the story. And, obviously this begins, in the 60s with some of the French filmmakers and carries on after that with the, in the 1970s and on. But, the best of needle drop use is when you can either comically find it, as a juxtaposition, or thematically put, a song in that once you watch it, maybe the second or the third time, you're like, oh God, it's so, I love the part where like this music comes in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like, and I don't need to mention the masters of needle drops because everybody knows who they are. But when you think of a lot of the films that those directors make, you're thinking a lot of times about, oh, I love it when Layla comes in here, when, the Sister Christian comes in and Boogie Nights scene with Thomas. Like these are moments where you're kind of like, it's almost like a mixtape and you're excited to get to that part and makes the movies more rewatchable.
Mm-hmm. The needle drops just work so well here. I'm curious about your work with Mark Fusco, with your editor.
Yep.
How challenging was it to find the pacing here? You hit us, right away, very impactful within the first 7 minutes of the film. And
Yep.
quite often when that happens, it's like, okay, then the film, it drags. It goes from the high to the low and it never recovers. That doesn't happen here. You hit us
Well,
high and
I
you keep us
appreciate that.
building.
Yeah, I mean, that's the intention. You know, obviously, when you have a four-person film, a small picture, and a picture that is marketed as as an action thriller, you have to really think about the way that you're going to pace it. But looking back at, I'm working on another project right now, and I'm watching, some of the earlier films of Walter Hill. I think he's a pretty good example of someone that understands a muscular pace while also paying respect to performances. And I think that this film is pretty similar in terms of, those kind of films, and Friedkin too. These are guys, and obviously even going back, all the way back to the films of like Elia Kazan, Martin Ritt, where the sort of actor studio version of a crime thriller, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to trust that your actors are going to carry you through, and you need to make sure that you're not overcomplicating. And so, and because there are two very long sequences in this film that are almost theatrical. There's a scene by the fire, and then the scene before it in the when they first are assaulted. And there's a lot of staging and blocking to be had, but keeping things tight around it, and also not making an overly long movie. I mean, when you're making a small thriller, you really shouldn't make a movie that's more than 90 minutes long. That's just my opinion. I think that we've gotten so used to these sort of bloated films. We've gotten so used to having to, open up worlds when you're really just talking about a core theme and a core plot. And I would like people to, especially because a lot of these films, are seen in your home now. It's like, if I'm looking to go watch a movie, if it says 88 minutes, I'm watching it. If it says an hour or 2 hours and 35, I don't care who's making it. I have to invest time to figure out how I'm going to do that. So what I think with that becomes then the efficiency of films, that from a long time ago, films like from the 40s and 50s, where they never thought of doing movies that were over an hour and a half unless it was a huge epic, And then that also then becomes a spiritual, guideline for you to sort of think back to not only the filmmakers I mentioned in the 70s, but also even way back to Howard Hawks and to, William Goldman. I'm sorry, not William Goldman. We'll go William Goldman's script, but Billy Wilder, and even Western directors like John Ford. Where they were really, really, really efficient with the way that they made their films.
It keeps moving here. You give us moments to breathe. And basically, it's during the father-daughter moments where we get to breathe and really appreciate what's unfolding. But you mentioned a really wonderful scene, which is the campfire scene. And I'm curious because you have a couple really beautiful night sequences here. Were you shooting night for night?
Yeah, we were. It was, we shot that fire scene, we shot over 2, maybe 3 nights because the wind was pretty bad too. It obviously created for some incredible visuals, but not so great for the sound. So we did do 2, 3 nights, and that was a hard one. That was a really hard. It was the 7.5-page scene with 4 actors, and there was also a couple of different things going on because Harlow goes into the trailer. And, the coffee is a third character, in my opinion. It's a kind of Hitchcock scene. And so diagramming all of it was tough. There was 35 different setups in that scene, maybe 40. So, just to get it so that you kept the pace. To give your answer about pace, the biggest thing I found is when you're dealing with scenes with actors like this and trying to get attention, is you have to have, a lot of pieces for the editor. So we can keep going to different things.
Absolutely.
If not, you're going to start lulling your audience, and there's a lot of incredible performance and plot things that happen in that scene. That's really like, as this film is pretty theatrical, I like to say that's like the end of Act 1 of the play, intermission, and then we come back and Act 2 basically afterwards, and everything it goes really wild from there.
Well, and you do need all the pieces here, because of the fact that it is a minimalist film in terms of your setting, your location, your design. You're in one small house. You're just utilizing a couple rooms. You've got narrow hallways. You've got to have something to maintain the visual interest.
Absolutely, and some of the scenes, there are three. In a small film like this, you really only get three big set pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our opening. We have the inspector scene, which is like my favorite scene in the movie. And then just because of the ingenuity of it and the way that I was able to pull it off. And then, of course, the big climax, which is the film thing.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the utility scene, because that actually, it adds a little bit of humor. For anybody that...
There's lots of humor. By the way, there's lots of humor in the film. And because, when you think back and this is something that I guess is just not in vogue anymore, but, movies like this didn't take themselves as seriously, a long time ago.
Right.
And even going back to the model of Desperate Hours, which is obviously a template for this film, and then a little bit Funny Games, European films still do it all the time. But I think that there's something that is sort of, and it's weird because the Coen brothers used to do it a lot, and then they didn't, and then everybody decided that the Coen brothers aren't adding humor to this stuff anymore, then we shouldn't be either. And so I don't really know why that happened, but to me, I look at this film, and I think humor is really, really important. I think I have a pretty good sense of humor. Emil is very funny, and we all kind of like to joke. And I think that in times of trauma, we are instantly drawn to have relief. And I'm a huge fan of horror films. And obviously, horror films are really just a mix of shocking and then relief with jokes a lot of the time. The best of the horror films, right, have a really, really keen sense of humor.
Oh, absolutely.
The horror filmmakers, whether it be Hitchcock or Carpenter, Sam Raimi, those are and Wes Craven. These are deemed the masters of suspense and horror, and all their movies have a tremendous sense of humor. So. I think that I would say the same here. I don't consider myself to be, coming from the school of hard-nosed, serious drama thriller. I definitely veer much more towards the filmmakers that I just mentioned, and even Sam Raimi, specifically, I watched The Simple Plan quite a few times before this film. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite movies. And boy, is that movie funny. It's funny around being really tense, but there are so many moments of humor in that film,
You hit it on every level here, Asher. One last question before I let you go. You always learn something with every project that you do. You've been around the block a few times already over the course of your career. But, what did you learn about yourself as a filmmaker in making Dig that you can now take forward and implement in future productions?
I think I learned that... you have to trust your actors, but also trust your instincts. And also, as much as I love being a director for performers, really understanding what your visual space is going to be for the film and not trying to be overly ambitious tends to make for a better film. Because when you're working with smaller budgets, a lot of times you don't want to make sacrifices and you make overly ambitious projects that don't come out the way you imagine them. But, attacking this film as just what the material was a lot easier for me to pull off exactly what I wanted. I mean, I will say that every single thing in that film is intentional. We did not have any sacrifices anywhere, and the movie looked exactly how I thought it was going to look from the time I read it, the time I shot it, the time I edited it. And we got very few notes in post, and which is great. And I think there was a very clear vision for what the film was.
Job well done. I can't wait for everybody to have a chance to see it when it opens, when it releases in a couple days.
Friday, the 23rd.
But I've got to add the big thing on my mind. Any release date on Slayers yet?
Yeah, it comes out October 21st.
Oh my God! I'm waiting. I'm anxious to see that one.
That's very different. Really crazy.
Hopefully we'll be chatting about that one after I get a chance to watch it.
Absolutely, 100%.
Oh, Asher, thank you so much. This has been a joy.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.